I mean, Drew, Levin, and I were playing on Moto Thursday night and ran into Sam Black, and we who play a lot of Magic and win a fair bit, screwed up all the time against stuff that was on board.
Yeah.
Because it's just, you're not used to seeing these cards in action.
Justin Nguyen with Goblins on the right. You might not know his name. Maybe you do if you're from this area, but earlier this weekend, Justin, top 4 of Standard.
Yes, he was playing Blue, White, Red Flash and was vanquished in the semifinals by our eventual champion, playing Red Splash Black Beatdown.
Goblins in his hands. Turn 1 Aether Vial, one of the 2 common openings that Goblins wants to get.
Yep. And Deathrite Shaman feels like pretty close to the ideal addition for Sam's deck here. His deck is so graveyard oriented that he can easily make good use out of all 3 modes, on top of whatever disruption it does to his opponent.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Deathrite Shaman has been so impressive to me about, and this is in every format that I've seen it played in, is that it's rare that you get a card that's as versatile as Deathrite Shaman. You know, you decide you put it in your deck because you want maybe a little bit of mana acceleration, and then you end up using it as a means to get reach that you didn't have before, or a means to disrupt your opponent. It's just an incredibly versatile card, which is one of the reasons we see it in Legacy. We've talked about how Tarmogoyf sometimes doesn't get played in even aggressive decks that run green because it's not versatile enough. Deathrite Shaman, incredibly versatile.
Yes, you're going to see him open with this. Although I would also assume that Deathrite Shaman is quite good against Sam's deck, so I'm not sure if this addition to the metagame is all upside for Sam, even though it appears in his deck.
Yeah. Well, he can guarantee he has it in his deck. His opponent might not have it in theirs.
Sure.
Here we go, 1 counter on the Aether Vial. If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan, here with Patrick Sullivan. This is round 8 of the Legacy Open. The Invitational is in the books, and we've got yet more Magic coming to you until we get to our final 8 of this Legacy, and then we'll have yet one more Major Champion as well as our Draft Champion at the end of the night.
Yep. And so Justin off to a very good Goblin start here with a turn 1 Aether Vial, and now a turn 2 Rashad Import. We'll see if he adds to a board or if he's just going to port Sam's Badlands on Sam's upkeep. And it's possible, like many of Sam's opponents, that he's not actually that familiar with what a Badlands into Deathrite Shaman definitely does not indicate any stock deck of the format. So,
well, one of the things, Sam Black is one of the probably best known players left in this event. I think it's very likely, if Justin's been at the top of the brackets, that he actually knows exactly what Sam is playing. Because you know, you're walking around and you see the probably most famous player in the row. You maybe take a glance what's in their play, that kind of thing.
Sure. So a Faithless Looting for Sam, cast off of his Deathrite Shaman. Finds a Thoughtseize, which makes a very nice pairing with the Cabal Therapy he also has in his hand. So he might not be able to blow up this vial, but he might be able to pick apart enough of Justin's relevant goblins where he doesn't have to really worry about it.
My favorite way to use a card like Cabal Therapy is to name what I fear. A lot of people try to play some game where they're like, I'm going to guess what you maybe have, but who cares if you guess the card they have in their hand if they don't have anything useful? Name what you fear.
Yeah, but fortunately for Sam, there probably won't be that much in the way of guessing games involved here, as I would assume he's going to lead off with his Thoughtseize.
Badlands, Thoughtseize, what you got?
Siege Gang Commander, Goblin War Chief, and 3 lands. So a fairly weak hand. It certainly got a lot worse now that, assuming we're going to take the War Chief out of the hand, and maybe therapy that Siege Gang down the line. Yep, and Sam just gets the War Chief out of there. And after that, no more plays from Sam.
Sam drops to 17.
You'll notice he discarded a Faithless Looting and a Lingering Souls to the first looting, so a lot of value plays. Justin drawing a Goblin Pile Driver.
Not one of the best cards to have be by himself.
Yeah, this is our resident Goblin expert, Cedric Phillips, very skeptical of this card in the main deck of Goblin decks. He likes it as a sideboard card for some matchups, but not a big fan of it game 1.
Yeah, he had a really interesting comment when he was talking about goblins versus merfolk that a lot of people in the legacy community at the time thought sounded crazy, but it sounded smart to me. And what he was saying was that Pile Driver was a card that was about aggression, and in a matchup against goblins versus merfolk, you wanted to be a controlling deck, so it wasn't actually that good, in Cedric's opinion, against merfolk.
Yep. And Sam just drew another discard spell, sort of, in Tidehollow Scholar. So we can really go to work on Justin's hand.
Sam contemplating using his fetch land here. He's got potential for 3 mana, despite that Rishadan Port holding down one of his bad lands. The Deathrite Shaman able to get a little bit of fuel from the fetch land in his graveyard now.
So, Sam, I assume we're probably going to find a scrub land here, diversify our mana a little bit. And Justin is reading Scrubland. Perhaps a little new to the format.
Alternately, he could be checking to see which printing it is.
Oh, sure. I suppose. Sam on the Sam Black, Gerard Fabiano, Badlands, Scrubland, Plateau mana base.
Justin Nguyen. Siege Gang Commander waiting in his hand, but Sam knows it.
Yep. And since we have so many discard spells Sam has so many discard spells in his hand, I assume we have to start casting him now because soon we're going to flashback Lingering Souls.
Okay. Carrion Feeder and Lingering Souls.
We may want to bring up the Carrion Feeder over there. Well, 1 mana, 1/1 that can't block, and you can sack a creature, give it +1/+1. Rarely seen in Legacy outside of some infinite combo decks. Sam just playing it because it's a good deal. No, not going infinite.
I mean, when it comes to this, I think he was waiting to see if they had the Spirit Tokens. Spirit Tokens, though, are a hard commodity to find over here in the feature match area. Literally, all of the Spirit Tokens were walked away with by our players this weekend.
Yep.
Pile Driver.
He's going to sack his fetch, thin out his deck a little bit.
Yeah, our booth as well, where we do all of our sales at all of these events. They went over there, they're like, hey, booth, we need some too. And the booth was like, we're sorry, we're sold out.
Yep. Very popular. Lots of Lingering Souls to be made. Lots of Moorland Haunts to be activated.
Aether Vial goes to 3.
Another land for Justin. So Sam willing to wait on the discard one more turn because there's no risk of that Siege Gang Commander coming in this turn, and then he might be able to tag something additional with that therapy by giving Justin an extra draw step.
Getting close to the dangerous 4 mana or 4 vial mark. Is there a ringleader to be found?
Nope. Doesn't appear so, at least.
Port?
Very challenging to port Sam's deck out of mana, as he has Deathrite Shaman, and his deck can also run at very little mana.
Okay. Sam is left with an untapped Badland, goes to his draw phase.
Bayou.
All of the non-blue colors.
I'm not sure if green is in the deck for any, I guess, Deathrite Shaman activation.
Yeah, Deathrite Shaman activation in the main deck.
So Sam is going to get in here, it looks like, with his 2 Lingering Souls tokens and the Carrion Feeder. Justin does not block.
Bayou. He gets the land out of Justin Nguyen's graveyard. Gets an extra mana. Faithless Looting is cast from the graveyard.
Yep.
Discard Cabal Therapy. Cabal Therapy?
Yep, 2 therapies.
Naming something, maybe Siege Gang?
I would have to assume so. Yep.
And it's land. Arid Mesa.
So Justin under not that much pressure yet, but Sam's starting to get his shop set up a little bit. A ringleader, even a jump home incinerator would be a very good draw for him here. So we're seeing Justin contemplating whether or not he wants to take this vial up.
Just draws, leaves it at 3. That was an unfortunate pull for him. Another land. In for 1. And that ringleader gets +2/+0 for every other goblin joining it in the attack, which is 2 times 0? Well, that's
There's
0.
a one-man army. So Justin porting again on the upkeep.
Oh, he's going to go for the red sources.
Cutting Sam off of his Badlands.
Okay, Sam thinking about whether he wants to Deathrite Shaman with that black mana.
Yeah, just trying to figure out if there's any draw that he could have, or how likely it is that a draw of his.
Exactly, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll stop it right there.
And there's Gravecrawler, and Gravecrawler, no stranger to success in Standard, obviously, but much more powerful in Sam's deck, as with Carrion Feeder, it's basically 1 black to put a +1/+1 counter on the Carrion Feeder with buyback.
Sam casts Tidehowl Scroll to check if there's anything new in the hand. He sees the Cavern of Souls, then lays the Gravecrawler afterwards. Gravecrawler with these zombies, a pretty huge combo with that Carrion Feeder.
Yes.
In they come.
I'm going to sack the Gravecrawler here to the Carrion Feeder. As next turn, Sam is just probably going to just keep activating it. So there's basically no point in leaving the Gravecrawler in play because he's not going to be attacking with it for damage next turn. He's going to be using it as an outlet. And we drew a...
Attention players in the Legacy Open. If at the end of this round you're X2 or better, you'd like to skip...
And there's a second pile driver.
And the beats.
There's nobody in line right now over the open.
If Justin doesn't quite know what's about to happen, it's about to get real bad. Is the short version of it.
Yeah.
I mean, Sam still has to be a little bit cautious because a ringleader off that vial off the top into a bunch of goblins it's not out of the question. Justin could actually kill Sam out of nowhere if Sam's not careful.
That's totally true. There is no deck in Extended that supplies the kind of, we'll call it, in quotes, fair card advantage and raw speed that a Goblin deck can suddenly shift into.
So as bad as the game looks for Justin, Sam cannot be too aggressive here. We're seeing the Gravecrawler into the Carrion Feeder. These two very good friends.
This is one of the reasons I love Legacy, actually.
Yeah, I mean Sam's deck is, and this is what I like about it is not only is Sam's deck crazy, but he sort of just built this one day, and he's been iterating on it for a while. And when you see decks like this, as I say all the time, it implies there's other stuff out there still yet to be discovered.
Absolutely. One of the things I like to think about with regards to Legacy is that as long as your deck is rational, it could be worth playing.
Yes. So now we have a big, looks like a 6/6 Carrion Feeder.
All of the monsters come on in, except for Deathrite Shaman and the fresh Gravecrawler.
So he's going to chump block 1. And now Sam's probably in the clear now. The 2 pile drivers were threatening that some outlandish sequence could come and kill him, but now we're probably safe. And there's a concession.
Justin scoops it on up. Yeah, we were talking about Goblins still being able to potentially muster a threat. I mean, I've seen so many times with that Vial in play, an opponent having literally no Goblins on the other side of the table, and then the next turn they're dead.
Yes.
To the sideboard for Justin Nguyen, hoping to come back from this. Mind Break Trap seems like a solid way to potentially deal with the recursion of Gravecrawler, but unfortunately, that's practically all it does.
Yeah, no way he's touching that one.
Relic of Progenitus, on the other hand, is a card well worth thinking about, because he doesn't have to worry about, it being clogged in his hand and Sam doesn't have the Gravecrawler combo. He can just use it straight up against Sam Black's graveyard-heavy deck.
Yeah, he also has 2 copies of Pyrokinesis. This is an excellent, it's the red Force of Will, as it were. An oft overlooked card, although it does get a lot of play in Goblin sideboard. It's just very good against any small creature matchup, and even though Sam's playing a lot out of the graveyard, Pyrokinesis could be excellent here.
Yeah, Pyrokinesis was so good in the era of Goblin's dominance of Legacy that players that were Goblin aficionados started trying to come up with anti-Pyrokinesis strategies, and some of these went pretty outlandish.
Yeah, it's a tough card to metagame against, certainly if you're a monocolored beatdown deck.
Yeah.
It's also, when I was in the top 8 of Indianapolis, the Invitational last year with Zoo, Jim Davis just destroyed me with it. I got roughed up pretty bad.
I believe, wasn't that in Indianapolis?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I remember that match. That was a really rough match.
Yes. On Sam's sideboard, and this is a pretty standard Sam Black board with just a lot of one-ofs of random utility. He has 2 copies of Go for the Throat, an Oblivion Ring, and a Pithing Needle, and a Dark Blast, all of which seem productive to me. I don't know exactly how far out of his way Sam is willing to go to have more answers to Goblin Lackey. Clearly the most threatening card in the Goblin deck, but a card like Dark Blast doesn't do a ton otherwise. It's just basically an anti-Lackey card. So whether or not Sam's willing to bring that card in probably depends on, how many bad cards does he have to cut out of his deck. And in this case, it seems like quite a few, as he has 12 discard spells that aren't at their best against goblins. And he will be on the draw, which is even more of an incentive for him to bring in additional insurance against Goblin Lackey.
Looking at the sideboard, it's really, as you put it, a very Sam Black sideboard. And what that means for those of you who have not really studied how Sam Black's decks often look, they're often, sideboard-wise, a lot of ones.
Yeah. And a lot of ones that sort of overlap in function. Like why 2 Go for the Throat, 1 Dark Blast? Well, in a lot of instances, those cards do roughly the same thing. And then sometimes having that diversity, it's much harder to play around when your opponent is showing you all these one-ofs, and assuming that you don't get caught with the wrong removal spell at the wrong time, that versatility is a lot of upside.
Yeah, particularly if it changes the way people play. I've seen people side out their artifacts for fear of an Ancient Grudge when there was only 1 in the 75 cards that they were facing.
Yeah, so this is Sam and I played in the Swiss rounds of the Invitational in Baltimore. I was on Burn and he was on Esperblade. And his sideboard against me was something, he had like a Dark Blast, a Diabolic Edict, a Disenchant. It was a lot of one-ofs. Now that was a little bit different as he had, when you have Jace, Ponder, Brainstorm, you have a lot more selection. But philosophically, Sam is generally in that space as a deck builder when it comes to his sideboards. He does have 3 Dark Confidant and 2 Disenchant though, so he has a little bit of redundancy. Dark Confidant, probably just a sideboard plan for control-ish type strategies.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing in a grind, there are few cards as good in a slow grind as Dark Confidant.
Yeah, I mean, Sam can sideboard in such a way that his deck is all recursion creatures, discard, and Dark Confidant, which is an excellent skeleton to have against a control deck.
If you play much Modern and you've played the Jund Mirror, you know that Dark Confidant, one of the must-kill cards of that mirror. Yeah. Same principle applies to the Dark Confidant in the Legacy sideboard here for Sam Black, and you would probably bring it in the same kinds of matchups.
And if you looked at Sam's sideboarding there, you see that there were a couple Gravecrawlers in his deck box. Gravecrawler is certainly one of the most powerful cards in Sam's deck, but Sam actually has to be kind of controlling here, and the game is very much played on the board, so he doesn't want a creature that can't block. He wants to be able to trade and sort of magnify how good his deck is in combat or at trading or at sacrificing for value.
Yeah, one of the problems he's going to have against Justin Nguyen, if Justin's draw is not torn up by Sam, if Justin has a solid draw, Sam can expect to be definitely on the back foot, trying to find, you know, an attempt, essentially, to keep from dying.
Yeah.
That game we just saw, you have to remember, it looked like a fairly weak hand from Justin, and then Sam helped him out with some solid discard.
Yeah. Although I had to assume some of that discard's left the deck.
Yeah.
12 is a lot to have in your deck against goblins, even if some of it's kind of free.
Turn 1 Goblin Lackey.
And Sam naturally has the Dark Blast.
Die. Uno.
And now he has a go for the throw it in his hand to handle the pile driver or war chief or what have you.
Another lackey? Another risky lackey?
Yeah, I mean,
Go for it, come on.
it's not getting any better. All right, we dredge our Dark Blast back and find a Bloodghast.
Yikes.
And that Bloodghast is the reason that Sam has one copy of Undiscovered Paradise in his list, which is a rarely seen land anymore from Visions. But with the Bloodghast, it's basically an unlimited source of recursion.
Undiscovered Paradise, a card from Visions. One of the things that it does is whenever you tap it, it's going to return to your hand at the end of the turn.
Or like the start of your next
Start of your next
awkward
turn?
timing, yeah.
The beginning of your next untap phase. A phrase you will not see in Magic cards anymore.
Yes. So Justin has drawn one of his sideboarded relics, and he's gonna not sacrifice it just yet.
It's a lot of can't block on the board.
And that last turn was an awesome play by Sam, as it turns out, because by dredging the Dark Blast, not only did he find the Bloodghast, but he also prevented this Dark Blast from getting eaten up by the Relic of Progenitus.
The awesome combos here in this deck. Sam could sacrifice, the Carrion Feeder after combat. Sorry, the Bloodghast to the Carrion Feeder after combat. Make his Carrion Feeder a little bit bigger, drop a land, and then back comes the Ghast.
Yeah, there are so many weird little wrinkles to this deck.
There he goes.
Marsh Flats, get back the Bloodghast.
One of the reasons we haven't seen this deck have much success in the hands of players who are not Sam Black, a lot of these interactions require a intimate knowledge of everything that's going to happen, not letting the little bonuses that you get ever go to waste, and knowing when you can let them go to waste. So some people, if they have not played this deck enough, just might miss out on the exact +1 they need somewhere to get a kill later in the game.
Yeah, it takes also a lot of rules proficiency, even besides the strategy. A lot of this is interactions with the way that things trigger, or the way that the order in which effects resolve, and so also requires a pretty advanced understanding of the rules to play well. Sam draws another fetch land. He attacks. It's a 4 spot, knocking Justin down to 13. So I assume we are going to sacrifice the Bloodghast here. Because we have a Marsh Flats, we actually have protection against that relic. So yeah. So Sam is... Right now the Bloodghast is in the graveyard because it's been sacrificed. So the Carrion Feeder is on the stack. And if Justin responds here with his relic, Sam can sacrifice the Marsh Flats in response, get another landfall trigger, and have the Bloodghast come back in. So this relic actually does nothing to break this up right now because Sam has the fetch land as insurance. So we'll see here if Justin bites on this. All right, he's going to relic.
Lose a card, your choice.
Okay, he's relicking that. Okay.
And the go-ahead.
Yep. All right, landfall trigger.
It's really hard to break this up.
Yeah.
Justin, try and come up with a way.
Spoiler alert. There is no way.
Yep. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here with Patrick Sullivan. you should make sure you join us in the Twitter conversation. Follow Star City Games Live at SCG Live. Join the conversation online, hashtag SCGEnvy. If you were following along on that conversation, you would know that Michael Hetrick was telling why he didn't play in the Legacy event today. This Legacy Open, a lot of people apparently were asking him, why weren't you playing? And his answer, he felt like Legacy had changed enough that he didn't realize where the format was, and he wants to take some time to think about it. Other insights, other conversation, hashtag SCGEnvy. Follow it all weekend to get more of the conversation.
So you'll see here at the end of the turn, Justin is porting one of Sam's fetch lands. In response, Sam is going to sacrifice his Bloodghast to the Carrion Feeder, and then sacrifice his fetch land that Justin was attempting to tap to go get a swamp. Sam probably doesn't want to expose that fetch land to a wasteland and lose it for no value. So since he probably has to go get a land anyway, at some point he has to get a land anyway, he's happy to just do all these interactions now while the Relic of Progenitus is down and pump his Carrion Feeder all the way up.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jason Felix, the last artist standing.
So Sam probably just explaining all these fairly complicated and usually unseen interactions.
Right. I mean, he's probably explaining it. Justin might be saying, yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Swamp number 2. Bloodghast in play. Sam's life now down to 18? Or is that 7? 18, apparently. Justin Nguyen, 13.
And yeah, that Carrion Feeder is just out of control. And this shows a lot of the power of Sam's deck. I mean, he's having no problem playing out of his graveyard against a Relic of Progenitus. There's a lot of graveyard-oriented decks that fold to a Tormod's Crypt or a Relic or a Leyline or what have you. I guess Leyline would have been good. But Sam is just still doing his thing, even with that Relic in play.
Justin Nguyen here really wants a Sting Scourger.
Yes. He's got a hand with Lackey, but he knows that Sam's holding Dark Blast. He's got Gem Palm Incinerator, but he can't really get anything on the table to stick. And he's under the gun here. I mean, the way things are shaking out, he's going to die in about 2 turns.
Fortunately for Justin Nguyen, he's got at least one little chump that can get in the way. Oh, wait, Dark Blast? Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I really think he should have laid that Lackey on turn 2 just because.
Maybe he's trying to just wait for a better spot or get that Relic online, start porting, but yeah, this is a tough row to hoe for sure. You can cycle a Gem Palm here, but even that's just...
Eat a card.
Yeah. Even cycling on that Bloodghast isn't very good because we just sacrifice the Carrion Feeder. And then get it back with the landfall trigger. And yeah, Justin decides it's not even worth a Gem Palm. He's going to nuke Sam's graveyard here. Get rid of that Dark Blast once and for all.
He draws a card for the privilege.
But yeah, unless he finds Sting Scourger pronto, that Carrion Feeder is just going to go all the way.
He's only got 1 Sting Scourger in his deck, but fortunately for Justin, what he does have is 4 Goblin tutors in the form of Goblin Matron.
Yes, but Sam's not going to give him that much time. And here's the Lingering Souls. And he has both Goblin Bombardment and multiple kill spells in his hand. And this is an awesome thing about Undiscovered Paradise here, right? He's got unlimited landfall triggers for his Bloodghast, and he's able to fetch 2 swamps to play around Wasteland, and use Undiscovered Paradise to make both white mana for Lingering Souls, and then make potentially red mana for Goblin Bombardment next turn.
Yes. A Pile Driver comes down, also known as food for the Carrion Feeder.
Yep.
It's even possible if Sam has a Tragic Slip or a Go for the Throat that the game just ends here.
Yeah, he actually has both in his hand.
Oh boy.
So he can sacrifice, slip the Pile Driver, and then play an Undiscovered Paradise, landfall trigger the Bloodghast, which then has haste, and play a Goblin Bombardment as insurance. I mean, this is just... He's going to cycle the Gem Palm in response. That's going to be sacrificed to the Carrion Feeder.
Sam Black is...
And then there's like... Yeah.
Gets the hand. Justin Nguyen packs it up, packs it in.
That was awesome. Sam Black in The Walking Dead. We've seen this deck now multiple times throughout the Open Series. He has a Grand Prix top 8, and this is, this shows you the way in which a lot of people can enjoy Legacy. It's not playing Rug or Maverick or Storm or some stock deck. He's just been working on his own brew, kind of in the lab the last year. New set comes out, he makes some tweaks, plays with the deck some, changes a card here and there, and is just putting up consistently good results with this deck.
Absolutely. You actually might remember this in Los Angeles quite a while ago. We were just meeting our coverage runner, Brendan Hickey, and I believe he was talking about a deck very similar with this. And I was talking with Sam later, and Sam was like, I've got this zombie deck I'm working on, blah, 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 blah. And I mentioned, the things I had heard from someone else who'd been working on it, and Sam was like, yeah, me too. So, Sam, innovative deck builder, doing a lot of stuff on his own, but one of the things about innovation, usually there's somebody else working on the same thing somewhere.
Yeah.
It's just a question of, are you the person that brings everyone the news of your deck?